we have to learn. So so I guess we'll begin with is there a bracha to say? Is it right to say a bracha? Which is the correct bracha? When will you say the bracha? And this will open up, other issues to discuss. So let me see if it's still there. Okay, I think I put the source sheet in the chat box. I'm going to share my screen also, maybe when we're reading, and then at certain points I'll stop the share to give people an opportunity to ask questions, to comment. Okay, before we begin, so the two most likely, hold on one second. Let me just, I'm sorry, I lost being host. Let me just, I'm sorry, I have to sign again to be a host. 1 second. Somehow, Mordechai Kramer, you became host somehow. So that means you're going to be responsible to mute people or to be in charge from behind your screen, Mordechai. Are you okay doing that?
Yes, I'll mute everybody right now.
Okay, great.
Except you.
Okay, great. And people will unmute themselves when they comment. Thank you, Mordechai. Okay. So the two strongest contenders of a bracha to say are Shehecheyanu, which we are more familiar with. We thank Hashem that we've reached a certain momentous or joyous moment or occasion. Another bracha, which is less familiar to people, Hatov HaMeitiv. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Blessed are you, Hashem, Hatov, the one who is good, v'Hameitiv, and who bestows good. So this is another one good example, silver lines that have come because of the pandemic. There's certain areas of halacha, new questions have been raised and have been investigated, and there've been opportunities to learn things ourselves, myself, even contemporary poskim have debated issues that hadn't really been settled yet. And there have been chidushim. We've even had chidushim in, so to speak, our base medrash of the Young Israel of Brookline, and perhaps we'll have some chidushim tonight as well. I began looking into this last week, and we discussed and learned it a little bit between Mincha and Marv on Shabbos, and I gained from the give and take in that group. And I'm sure you'll all have important insights as we learn tonight as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to begin learning together.
Quick question first.
Yes, Louise.
I've not heard any talk about benching Gomel, because that would have been my obvious first.
Well,
choice,
if someone was severely ill with COVID, when they would get better, they should bench Gomel.
But we've all been endangered by this thing that could have been life-threatening.
You're right. It's a good question. So, but for halacha's definition of being in a dangerous situation, I don't think it would qualify. It's just, that's not the topic of tonight's shiur, but we're just a little bit too removed to say the bracha. But it's a definitely good question. Okay, let me share my screen and we will begin. Okay, so hopefully everyone sees this. Okay, great. A bracha on a vaccine. So the first source is a Mishnah from Maseches Brachos. This is just a general introduction of the brachos of Shehecheyanu and Hatov HaMeitiv. We first learn about it in a Mishnah. And the Mishnah says, Al HaGeshamim, for rain. Most understand that to mean after a drought or after when people are really looking for, when we really need rain. Val Besoro Tovot, and on good tidings, you hear good news. So this means something significant. You hear that you have had a child, or there's some great financial windfall. You hear some really good news. Omer, you would say Baruch Hatov HaMeitiv, the full bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Hatov HaMeitiv, the one who is good and who bestows good. Val Basuros Ra'os, but on bad tidings, Omer, Baruch atah Hashem, etc., Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge. Now we are familiar with that bracha when unfortunately someone close to us passes away. But it's not really limited to that. There's no halacha specifically related to mourning or when someone passes away to say the bracha of Dayan Ha'emet. It's a bracha on bad tidings in general. We'll see that we have come to limit its use, generally speaking, to to when someone passes away, but really on any very bad tiding, it would be appropriate to say the bracha. If let's say there's some great financial catastrophe that affects someone, even chas v'shalom, some injury or sickness that doesn't necessarily kill someone, according to the Mishnah, you would react to that very bad news with the bracha of Dayan Ha'emet. Okay, continuing the Mishnah. Bana bayis chadash. If you build a new home, v'kana kelim chadashim, or you acquire new, we normally translate kelim as vessels, but it could be anything. It could be fine china, it could be clothing, it could be furniture. Again, something significant that brings joy. Omer, so on those occasions you say, quote, Baruch Hashem, Mitzvah, Shehachiyanu, V'kiyamanu, V'higiyanu, Lazman Hazeh. Then blessed are you, Hashem, who has given us life and brought us to this moment. So this is the Mishnah that introduces us to these two brachos, Hatov v'Hametiv and Shehachiyanu. They're both clearly celebratory brachos, but it's not really clear from the Mishnah why on some occasions you say one bracha and on some occasions you say another bracha. The Gemara continues and adds other occasions when you might say these brachos or additions. It says if you haven't seen someone, a very dear friend, for over a month, in principle, you could say Shehachiyanu. If you haven't seen a dear friend, and that means like in any way, Zoom, nothing, for over a year, the Gemara says there's even a bracha of Mechayeh HaMeisim, the one who brings people back to life, so to speak. The person was gone from us. But over many, many centuries, the tradition developed that some of these brachos we really don't say at all anymore. And many of them we limit. And we'll learn a little bit why that developed. The bracha of seeing a friend after 30 days or even a year, the custom is really not to say. Maybe for a close family member, if you're separated from a parent or a spouse or a child for that amount of time, maybe. But over friends, we really don't say these brachos anymore. The poskim explain one suggestion of the reason is because, these are subjective things. It's hard to determine what friend is close enough to make the bracha on. It's also hard to tell people to differentiate between friends. Which friends are you going to put in tier one that you'll say the bracha on, and which friends would you not put in tier one? And let's say someone comes, they haven't seen you in a year, and they think you guys are close friends, and they're expecting you to say a bracha, and then that person arrives, and you weren't such a close friend, and you don't say the bracha. It could be insulting. So, just as one example of that bracha, we don't really seem to say so much anymore. We mentioned Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge. We do say when someone passes away, but typically most people don't say that bracha, even on other very bad news. And part of the reason, we'll learn more, part of the reason is that since these are things that are hard to define, halacha can't give exact parameters. When is something sad enough, or when is something joyous enough to say it? So it became less frequent when we would say these kinds of brachos. Okay, just as there's that tendency just to be aware of before we begin. So in this source, we have Shehachiyanu or Hatov HaMeitiv for a new house, for other significant acquisition, for the first rain, for good tidings. When else do we say Shehachiyanu? Someone just unmute and call out.
New clothing.
New clothing. Okay, excellent. So that would be included in Kelim Chadashim. I should have given that as an example. Kelim Chadashim is acquiring any new item. When else do we say Shehachiyanu?
Hanukkah candles.
I didn't hear. Say it again.
Hanukkah candles.
Hanukkah candles, very good. Or as that would be one example of mitzvahs. Okay, so mitzvahs that are very joyous, that come around once a time a year. Excellent. So that's a whole nother category of Shehachiyanu, which we're going to come to, related to mitzvahs. Okay, excellent. What's another example?
New foods.
New foods, excellent. New foods. I didn't hear who said that, but new foods. Excellent. So new foods you would have expected to be in Maseches Brachos in this Mishnah and the discussion of the Gemara attached to it about new items, etc. But it does not appear there. The new fruit only appears in our next source in Maseches Erevin 40b, which is really in the context of the Shechianu of the Regalim of Yom Tov. We say Shechianu for the holidays. There obviously is some common denominator, but there is some discussion. The Shechianu of, let's say, a new house, is about that. It's this really exciting, joyous time. For Yantivs, there is a joy to it, certainly also, but there's also more of a stress on the time. Shechianu, the Kimana begin Lazmana, that's this time. So anyways, in the context of Shechianu on Yom Tovim, the Gemara says as follows, Amar Rabbi. I'm reading now this source here. Ki Havina be Rav Huna, when I was a student in Rav Huna's yeshiva. Rav Huna was a student of the famous Amoraim Rav and Shmuel. We had the following question. Mahu lomer zman b'Rosh Hashanah u'b'Yom Kippur. Are we supposed to say zman, which is the rabbinic way to refer to Shechianu? Lazman is that. Do you say Shechianu Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Kevan demizman lazman asi, since they occur, from time to time, once a year. Amrinan, perhaps we should say it. It's appropriate to say it. Odilma, or perhaps Kevan delo ikru regalim lo amrinan, since they're not one of the shalosh regalim, they're not as joyous as those Yom Tovim. Maybe we don't say it. Lo havi biyade, and Rav Huna didn't know. He didn't have it in his hand, literally. He didn't know. Okay, this is the next line of the Gemara, the next Hebrew passage here. Ki yasai be Rav Yehuda. So then we went to Rav Yehuda's yeshiva, or his base medrash, a contemporary of Rav Huna, both students of Rav and Shmuel. Amar, and they asked Rav Yehuda the same thing. Do you say Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Amar, he said, Ana, I personally, akra chadata nami aminazman. I even chadata is a chadash new. Akra, if you remember from your Rosh Hashanah simanim, is the gourd, koreg zardinenu. I say Shechianu when I see the new gourds in the fall. Seemingly saying if I say a Shechianu on new gourds, obviously you should say Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Amri, so we said to Rav Yehuda, no, Reshus lo kami boili. We are not asking whether or not it is permitted to say Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We certainly know it is permitted and appropriate. Ki kami boili chova mai. But our question is it obligatory? On Pesach Shavuos Sukkos, it's obligatory. Is it also obligatory in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, or is it only optional if one feels like it? Amar li, so Rav Yehuda said to me, Rav Shmuel, my two teachers, Rav Shmuel, Damri Taro, they both said, Ein Omer Zman Ela b'Shalosh Regalim. You do not say Shechin. I mean, you're not obligated on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You're only obligated on the 3 Regalim. The Gemara then continues and rejects that, and we hold that you say Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, as we do, you may be familiar. Okay, but the point here is, this is the only reference in the Gemara to saying Shechianu on a new fruit. And it's clear in the Gemara that saying Shechianu on a new fruit is not an absolute requirement, right? That's what Rav Yehuda's response was. He says, oh, okay, I know you're allowed to, if you want to, if you feel like it, on a new fruit, say Shechianu. So certainly you're allowed to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but I'm asking, is it even obligatory? Apparently there's some Shechianus that are obligatory. It's a chiyuv, it's not optional. And sometimes it is optional for the Yom Tovim and for the mitzvos of, let's say, obviously Hanukkah, that's obligatory. The rabbis instituted those brachos. And we know that some are optional, let's say when you see a new fruit. And their question was, well, what about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? One could have understood that only the new fruit is a reshus, is optional. But all of those examples listed in Maseches Brachos, a new house, new items, that is an obligation. That's in the Mishnah. But the general consensus is that even those shechianus, all the shechianus, when something good happens to you, you have a child, you buy a house, some really good news, those are only reshus. Those are only optional. If you'd like to, you can, but you are not obligated to do so, as opposed to the shechianu of Yom Tov and of, let's say, mitzvos, where it is in obligation. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here, give an opportunity for people to ask questions. I have some more points to make about these sources, but let me just stop sharing the screen for a minute or two. Anyone want to ask anything? Anything that's not clear right now?
Yes, I'm not clear because
Yes, Carol.
because my memory is short. When we started this shiur, are we talking about we're obligated to say a bracha around the zrika, or is there something we can, should we want to acknowledge it?
Well, we have to get there. We're working towards that, but let me just respond to that. So again, it's clear in the Gemara that the shechianu of the regalim of Yantiv and the shechianu of, let's say, Hanukkah candles, etc., those are an obligation. The shechianus, though, of joyous occasions, of good tidings, of when a family has a baby, they buy a new house, etc., those are what the Gemara calls reshus. Now, the reshus, they're optional in two ways. One, it's just not a full-fledged obligation. But two, presumably, part of the idea is that they are subjective. The assumption of all commentaries is you only make a shechianu on a new house if you truly are excited. It's a joyous occasion. Let's say when we come to clothes, it used to be if someone bought, a new suit that was, you owned one suit, and another suit, and only bought one every 10 years. It was a really special occasion. So you would say shechianu. Nowadays, I think it's assumed, at least, I don't know, people who I speak to, I don't think most people say shechianu when they buy clothing. I don't think so. It's just not as exciting for us anymore. We don't have we don't have the same joy and excitement as maybe the Gemara was assuming. So it's reshus in that way. It's subjective, and therefore it's not an absolute black and white obligation. So hopefully that responds to you, Carol. And any other questions or comments?
In Gomel, you have to say with a minyan. You have to say with 10 people. Gomel.
You're supposed to, yes. But let's leave Gomel aside. Right now we're
Okay. I'm just trying to clarify information. Thank you.
Sure. Now, okay, let me make a few comments. These brachos, we don't really say that often, right? We don't say shechianu for subjective personal events in our lives that often. Maybe some of us did when we had a child. But other than that, maybe buying a house, we don't really say it that often. We mentioned Dayan Hamet, we really don't say it all other than when someone passes away. And there was a tendency already, the Shulchan Aruch says that we tend to not say these brachos. And the reasoning presumably is that the original sources can't give such clear guidelines precisely when to say it, when not to, because it's personal, it's subjective. We don't want to say Hashem's name in vain if it's not really appropriate. And so the tendency developed to not say these brachos. So now I'll be honest and share with you something. Several people have asked me about this, maybe more than several. And the very first person who asked me this was before it was really a hot topic, at least a couple of weeks ago. And, I kind of downplayed it. And I said, no, I wouldn't probably say a bracha. That's what I told the person at the time without really thinking, just kind of like in conversation. And I think part of it was, it was before anyone I knew had certainly gotten the vaccine. It wasn't really as real yet. I also sort of had this tendency in the back of my mind, we don't sort of rush to say shechianu where there isn't a sort of an established custom to say it. And also the two of us, myself and this other person, who's someone, in general my age demographic, younger than me. Let me say it differently. There will be some people who it will be extremely emotional and a really, really big deal when they get the vaccine, whether it's because of their age or health situation, or whether it's they're a doctor or a nurse working in a hospital. And there are other people where it just won't have the same emotional punch to it. And that's just, understandable. And maybe I wasn't really imagining that or appreciating that as much at the time. And it is true that there really seems to be a sincere drive by many people to thank Hashem for the vaccine, which is a beautiful thing. And, that's something that we don't want to deny. It would be unfortunate if, let's say, we have all these people that want to say something, do something for Hashem, and we can't find the right way for them to express that. Now, we can't, change the halacha like in a black and white way because of that. If something wouldn't be allowed, even though we would want to allow it, we can't allow something which is not allowed. But, it certainly is something very important to bear in mind. And in this situation, to me, it carries great weight in the sense of, normally, let's say we do have a tendency to, let's say, not increase the number of brachos we say or shechianu, since we've a little bit lost our tradition of when to say it, when not to say it. But I think in this case, and there are some posting that approach the issue with that frame of mind, which I can't say is wrong. But to me, this really is a unique, event in our lifetimes. And again, it will be incredibly important for many, many people. And there is a really very strong, sincere desire to have a bracha. And to me, that outweighs any tendency, that maybe in other situations we would say, we don't really say shechianus in so much in these kinds of things. So to me, that, that's important. So given that, I think that overrides, let's say, the general tradition to not say shechianus that often, but we still have to figure out still, is it really right? Or maybe it's not shechianu, maybe it's atova meitiv, which bracha is the appropriate bracha? And we do have to make sure that it really is right to, say Hashem's name in the form of a bracha, which shouldn't be taken lightly. We're going to continue with the second page of the sources, but before that, any questions or comments? Okay, before I share the screen to look at the second pages, I will now ask the following question. The Mishnah said you say shechianu or hatova meitim on good tidings, good news. So the question is, well, what kind of news? If you look at the source sheet, what about the Patriots win the Super Bowl and you are a diehard Patriots fan and it really does make you happy, right? That really does make you happy. So, I'm sure you could guess. We don't say shechianu on that. Or what about other, let's say, even more elevated joyous moments in our lifetime? There is no tradition to, let's say shechianu, as far as I know, let's say at a child's wedding, even though that's an incredibly joyous moment. What about
the bride and groom don't say shechianu?
Correct. Even the bride and groom. That's a very, thank you, Michael. That's a classically discussed question, that many people wonder about. The bride and groom don't say shechianu. What about, this is a little bit more gray, but what about the birth of a grandchild? What about, let's say you or your child's like the first person in the family ever to graduate college, and you're the parent and you're there in tears and you are so happy, right? Should you say shechianu? So we have to sort of define this a little bit better. Now, before I continue, just so you're aware of sort of the opinions that are out there. There are some that, well, I'll start on this side of things. Many may be aware that Rav Schachter said people should say Hatov V'Ameitiv. We'll get to the reasoning. Many people are aware that he himself said it when he got the vaccine, and unfortunately, perhaps he was misled and received it under circumstances that he was not aware of. But in terms of the halacha for us, he said people should say Hatov V'Ameitiv. There are others. Rav Asher Weiss, who's a very a leading posek Talmid Chacham today. Shlomo Aviner, who's in the religious Zionist community in Israel, they both said, no, you should not say a bracha. You should do something else. You should say a parak of Tehillim. You should certainly thank Hashem. But we'll see for technical reasons, they thought you should not say a bracha. Rav Yossi Tzvi Rimon, also a very distinguished Rav and posek in the religious Zionist community, he said, you should say a bracha and you should say Shechiyanu. That's his preferred bracha. So we're going to sort of get into this. What are these, the poskim of today? What are the issues that they disagree about? And that is the basis for their opinions. So returning to our questions, should you say Shechiyanu when the Patriots win the Super Bowl, when you have a grandchild, on these kinds of things, which obviously are moments of great, great joy. So let me share the screen again. You're about to see a tshuva, a response from the Rashba Shlomo ben Aderet, who's one of the greatest of the Rishonim. He lived in Spain in the 13th century. And he writes as follows. This is one passage at part of a slightly longer tshuva. He says, Lo b'chol davar shenena huva acherem imo mevarich hatov v'ameitiv. It's not for anything that you enjoy, you and others, that you would say the bracha of Hatov V'Ameitiv or Shehachiyanu. Ela bedavar sheyesh lo toelas v'hana abo ulacher mimo. It is only something where I'm going to translate this as there's a benefit or more tangible benefit for you and others. Now, before I continue, let me just reveal one thing. Eventually, we'll see the Gemara says the difference between Shechiyanu and Hatov V'Ameitiv. Shechiyanu is when there's something which is good and it's good just for you. Whereas Hatov V'Ameitiv is you say when there is a group enjoying something. So a family buys a house, so the family would say Hatov V'Ameitiv. But if it's just an individual buying a house, the individual would say Shechiyanu. So the Rashba happens to be talking about in the context of Hatov V'Ameitiv when there's a group enjoying something. So he says it has to be something where it's not just something that makes you happy, but it's something where you are getting some benefit. Kagon Yeridas Hagashamim v'Yerushas Akrovim, for example, when it rains and you're a farmer, or you have some great inheritance. Va'afilu b'riboy yain, or even there's a special Hatov V'Ameitiv when there's over wine. Va'acherem nenim v'shosim menu yimo, there are people enjoying wine. Aval behana'a levad lo matzinu. But there is no source in the Gemara that you say Shechiyanu or Hatov V'Ameitiv on something which merely brings pleasure or joy. She'im kain, for if so, lama shalu beyalda ishto zachar man ikachrina behade. Why does one of the following question? Let me tell you the Gemara. The Gemara says when the child is born, you say Hatov V'Ameitiv. The Gemara says, but you only say Hatov V'Ameitiv when there's a group that is receiving this tov, this good thing. Va'amr, the Gemara says, Dehasam nami ika ishta bade, referring from the husband's perspective, says, well, his wife is there. It's a husband and wife. So there's two of them who have been blessed with the baby. So they say Hatov V'Ameitiv. Teipuk lei, so the Rashba says, why does it have to be that he's married? I mean, if there's a baby, there has to be a woman involved, but there's the whole family. There's the siblings of the baby. There's, I don't know, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles. And everyone is happy. You come to shul and you announce and there's a kiddush, everyone is happy. Ela shahanas toelas kamar. You only say Shechiyanu or Hatov V'Ameitiv when you receive something, when there's some good that benefits you personally, and in some tangible or a more defined way. So when the parents have a baby, they're receiving something, they've gained something. Now he refers to it in a practical matter. This is a phrase from the Gemara. Chada, first of all, Dehavale chutra liyada umara likvura. This is a phrase from a Gemara from another context, but it means a child is a staff for your hand. It means a child will take care of you when you're older. Umara likvura, and literally, it's not such a nice phrase, but it means a shovel for the grave. But it means the child takes care of you to the end of your life. Va'od shu kayerech ha'av v'ha'em, and the child is like the thigh, the extension of the father and mother. Umidas kol adam te'evin lo liyorshin, and it is natural. All people desire to have children who will inherit them, who will be their legacy, etc. So what the Rashba seems to be saying is when parents are blessed with a child, they have received a child, they've gotten a child. So they say Shechianu, or they say Hatova Meitiv for their two parents together. You could be ecstatic that the Patriots won the Super Bowl, and there could be real joy, but we don't view that as, you didn't get anything. Like, first of all, it wasn't specific to you. It's not personal to you.
What if you're Bob Kraft?
Except, okay, if you're Bob, that's right, right. And all the players get bonuses. They maybe could say Shechianu on their bonuses, but it has to be something that is a benefit, is some blessing to you specifically. And this is why, on a technical level, let's say referring to some of these situations, let's say you're a parent and it's a moment of incredible nachas, whether the child graduated or is getting married or whatever it is. There might be incredible joy, but, if you ask the parent, like, what did you get, right? The parent didn't, accomplish anything or receive anything or have anything accrued to them. They're enjoying this. They're getting incredible, sublime joy. That's true. Some people get incredible, sublime joy from the Patriots, but that would not be a time where you would say Shechianu or Hatova Meitiv. Now, the reasoning behind this is, now this is sort of a quality of halacha in general. Halacha deals with more things that can be defined, that are measurable, that are tangible, that you can touch, generally speaking. So it's not surprising that Chazal did not enact a bracha just on joy, sort of formless, bodiless joy. That's too ephemeral. They would establish this bracha for great joy arising from again something that you got. You received a child, you were blessed with a child, with financial gain, with building a house, etc. A new fruit, if that really brings you joy, but it has to be something along those lines.
But then where does Yontiv then fall in?
Correct. That's a good point. That's a good point. So that this would be a difference between this is more for the joy category of Shechianu as opposed to the Yontiv category. You're
So
right.
I have another question also. If you're
Sure.
talking,
Yes,
if
Carol,
you're talking about, for example, a child graduating
Yep.
college,
Yep.
or something like that.
Yep.
I don't know way back when this was written, what circumstances were, but certainly today you can have many children who have great difficulty just growing up, or a single mom raising this child without finances, and so their personal investment and their personal joy is different than you're talking about now. And then the Shechianu not only makes sense, in a way, it could almost feel like an obligation, depending on one's belief system about, I never thought we'd get here. Thank you so much for this.
So we always have to thank Hashem and find appropriate ways to thank Hashem, at significant moments in our lives. But the bracha of Shechianu, again, it can't just be a moment of joy and achas. There has to be something a little bit directly that you are the recipient of this good and or this accomplishment, and it has to be somewhat definable, and you're receiving something, you are benefiting, you are accruing something. Now
But
the Mishnah Berurah
that's
quote.
my question. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt.
Yeah,
That's
so
my
Yontif
question about
Shechianu is
Yontif.
different. You're right, Louise.
But it's a
Yontif Shech-
community, because it's a community. The regalim are community events, not personal events.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's the distinction, but
But you just, no, you said before that Shechianu was more of a communal thing. The baby is a member of the community and multiple people. And
but the
No,
point
so
is
the-
others don't see it.
or not.
Others do not say Shechianu. Only the parents say Shechianu on the birth of a baby because it's their blessing. It went to them. Some
Right,
even if others are
but
incredibly
Yontif comes
happy
to all
for
of
them.
us. But Yontif
Correct.
comes to all of us as a community, not individual people. No?
No,
Okay.
let's leave the lunch Shechianu is a little bit different. Right now we're talking about just the category of Shechianu for again when something happens. The Mishnah Berurah quotes this tshuva because he says there are some, and there maybe still are some who would say Shechianu for a grandchild when a grandchild would be born. For children for sure, and when a grandchild was born also. The Mishnah Berurah thinks that the Rashba would disagree with that. Maybe it's not explicit in the Rashba, and maybe a grandchild, we could say it's sort of your grandchild. It is a little bit different than, let's say, just someone in the community or a sibling. Maybe the grandparent, it's sort of his or her grandchild a little bit. But so there are some different opinions about grandchildren, but this is the basic idea. Now, what are some of the objections to people not saying a bracha on the vaccine? So Rav Asher Weiss, clearly is coming from, there's a tendency not to create new events where we say Shechianu. That's certainly part of his thinking. He also does seem to think that sort of the vaccine I don't totally understand it, but he seems to say that the vaccine also is somehow like not significant enough. It's like there's this joy out there, but what did you get? You can't point to anything that you received. Now, I think the other post can disagree and say you're getting a vaccine, and this vaccine is bringing you joy, and it's a really big deal. So, and that's certainly how I would have looked at it. So you're getting a vaccine. This is using the words of the Rashba. There is, I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen just for another few minutes. There is toelet bo. This is not just joy. There, you are definitely getting a benefit. Now, others.
But how does that change in terms of let's say the flu vaccine? I mean, it's an annual. I mean, thank God we don't see the threat of the flu vaccine because of how long it's been around. But
yeah, excellent. So the answer to that question is, if someone was truly, full of joy when they got the flu vaccine, so maybe we would say the same thing, but we don't feel any joy when we get a flu vaccine, right? So, it's like Shana saying she does. But if you really, really, are so excited and overcome with emotion, then in theory you could. But we just aren't. I think that's the answer to the flu vaccine. And it could be, if someone's going to ask me, well, am I going to say a bracha? I don't really know, because again, you only should say it if you really are excited. I could be way down at the bottom of the line when I'm going to get it. And it could be, I don't know, but it could be by then, things will be so under control. I don't know. It won't be as exciting. I don't know. Okay. Some people are, saying that's not, but so it depends on a lot of things. It depends on your personal experience. It depends on, I don't know what sort of the mood is, but you certainly should only say a bracha. I think many people here on this call, because it is going to be a big deal for them. You should only say the bracha if you are, joyful. So that's the difference between the flu vaccine. Now, someone asked me, well, maybe you shouldn't say Shechianu because, maybe there will be a side effect. Maybe even the person's not saying you shouldn't take the vaccine, but maybe this is not going to be a purely good thing. Maybe there'll even be a significant side effect. Now, for that for sure is not correct. It's a legitimate point to bring up, because the Gemara says explicitly. The Gemara says explicitly that if something good happened now, and it does bring you joy now, even though you know it might cause some bad news later on, you still say Shechianu. The Gemara's case is you find a bag of gold coins. That's not exactly how the Gemara puts it, but you find a bag of gold coins, and you somehow know, though, somehow like the Duke might get you in trouble if he finds out, and somehow it could lead to something bad. But right now, you just found a bag of gold coins. You are really happy. You say Shechianu, and vice versa. Even if there's something bad, which could lead to eventually something good, but if it's bad right now, you say Dayan Ha'emet. So the fact that something bad may come out of it, that's not an objection. There's some that, had an objection, and I think Rav Asher Weiss raises this possibility also, that even if there won't be some significant side effect, but and maybe someone will share if they've gotten the vaccine, but if there's just pain, just the soreness, the pain of getting the vaccine, it's not a purely sort of happy occasion, maybe then you shouldn't say Shechianu. And there's some basis for this, because according to some Rishonim, the reason why Ashkenazim don't say Shechianu at a bris is because the baby's in pain. I can't get into the nitty-gritty of debating this point, but it is clear that you do say Shechianu when there's also something bad happening. The Gemara says if Chas v'Shalom a parent passes away and you say Dayan Hamed on the parent, but you also simultaneously inherit a fortune which changes your life, and you want to say Shechianu on that, you would say Shechianu, even though there's something sad going on also at the same time. So, and the amount of pain, discomfort that you feel when you're getting the vaccine, is just, I don't think is significant halachically to tell someone not to say Shechianu.
So are you are you encapsulating that under basically gratitude, and that's what sort of leads to Shechianu?
Let's say yes. Yeah, gratitude. Yeah.
Okay.
There is another possible objection, and this is perhaps the most serious halachically of the objections to say a bracha, and that is, do you say Shechianu? The cases in the Gemara, generally speaking, are Shechianu when you get something good. A baby is born, you build a new house, you inherit a lot of money. Here, this thing which is causing us a lot of joy is not sort of objectively inherently good. It's really protection from something bad. Now, we're really happy that we have this protection from something bad, but maybe you don't say Shechianu if it's just receiving protection from something bad. It's hard to totally disprove this, but there's no real basis to make that distinction. And maybe one proof against that is we saw the Mishnah says you say Shechianu on the first rain after a drought. Even though the only reason why you're really happy, significantly happy to say the bracha is because it's the end of the drought, which also sort of the end of something bad. So you do seem to see from there that you do say Shechianu or Hatova Meitiv on sort of the cessation of something bad if it does bring you joy. So let me just summarize. You only say Shechianu or Hatova Meitiv if you are sort of receiving something, getting something personal to you that brings you joy. In my mind, the vaccine certainly qualifies. Yes, your arm may hurt a little bit. That seems to be insignificant. The fact that there may be a later, more serious side effect also would not prevent you from saying the bracha. And even if this is merely protection from something bad, but still it causes incredible joy. And I certainly would think that you should say a bracha. Now, the last issue is what bracha to say. Do you say Shechianu or do you say Hatova Meitiv? Now, again, the basic difference between Shechianu and Hatova Meitiv is Shechianu is when something good happens for you, and Hatova Meitiv is when there is a good that benefits many people. So you would probably think that if you're going to say a bracha on the vaccine, you should say, someone jump in.
Meitiv, it's for everybody.
Both of them.
Hatova Meitiv, that's what you would
Both of
think.
them.
Both of them. That's the,
Right,
that I
that's
can't
the-
get into that.
that's
But
the case, both of them.
but Hatov Meitiv. Okay, so we have to see the next source. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on for just 1 second. Here we go. Now the Gemara that we're about to see is the Gemara, which basically is a source for the distinction between a personal good and a good that involves many people. So the Gemara is commenting on the first part of the Mishnah, which says that for rain, you say Hatova Meitiv. So the Gemara says, Is Le'ara, if you have land, because the Gemara said if you don't have land, you wouldn't make a bracha. But if you have land, Hatova Meitiv Mavarach, you should say Hatova Meitiv. V'hatzanan, but the Mishnah says in the next line, Bana Bais Chadash, when you build a new house, Kanakin Chadashim, you acquire new items. Omer, Baruch Shechianu V'Kimanu V'Gianu Lazman Hazeh. You say Shechianu. So which is it? What if something good happens? You say Hatova Meitiv, or do you say Shechianu? So the Gemara answers, Lo Kasha. This is not a difficulty. Ha de Islay Shutfus. Ha de Leislay Shutfus. One is talking about when you have a partner with someone, a partnership, and one is when you do not have a partner. V'hatane, for we learned in a brisa. Kisro shel davar, the basic rule is al shelo, if it's only his benefit, his or hers, one person, who omar baruch shechianu v'kimanu v'ganu lazman hazeh, you say shechianu. Al shelo v'al shel chavero, but when it is for you and your fellow, meaning multiple people are enjoying it, Omer, you say hatova meitiv. He is good and he bestows good. It's an overflowing good. It flows to multiple people. So let me just review this piece of Gemara. Gemara has a contradiction. It says for rain, you say hatova meitiv. But for a house, you say shechianu. Well, what's the difference? So Gemara says the difference is it just you or are there partners? So I'm going to unshare my screen again. So everyone agrees that when it comes to a house, it depends. If you're going to live there by yourself, you just say shechianu. If you're going to live there with a roommate or with a family member, you say hatova meitiv. If it's just you, shechianu. If multiple people are enjoying the house, you say hatova meitiv. The question is, what did the Gemara mean, though, by the rain? Anyone want to comment or try to fit this together? I'm sorry, I know we're going a little fast, but
The first train?
so Rashi says, but by rain, what the Gemara means is you always say hatova meitiv because you don't need to have a partner to say hatova meitiv for the rain, because by the rain, there's always multiple people benefiting. The rain benefits my field, the rain benefits your field, multiple people are benefiting. So you say hatova meitiv. For a house, you need to have partners or others that own the house together or use the house together to say hatova meitiv. But rain by definition is communal. Rain, even though I'm enjoying it and benefiting from the rain for my field that I own alone, and my neighbor is enjoying and benefiting from the rain for his field that he owns alone. But there are many people benefiting from the rain. So we say hatova meitiv. That is the opinion of Rashi. Okay. The Rush, another Rishon, disagrees. And the Rush says, no, the same rule follows. When it rains, if you own a field privately, you say shechianu. You are enjoying it yourself. If you own a field with a partner, then you are enjoying the rain together with someone. You say hatova meitiv. Even for the rain, you need to have a partner to say hatova meitiv. If everyone is enjoying the rain separately but simultaneously, that still is only shechianu. It's only when we together in a joint field, like a joint house, do you say hatova meitiv. I'm going to say this machlokas again because I have a feeling not everyone followed. Okay, I'm going to say it again. The basic distinction is a personal good, you say shechianu, a shared good, you say hatova meitiv. So for a house, that's easy, everyone agrees. If you live in a house alone, it's a personal good, you say shechianu. If you live in it with someone else, it's a shared good. For a new house, you say hatova meitiv. That everyone agrees. But there's a machlokas how to understand what the Gemara meant regarding rain. it rains. It rains on everyone's field. Rashi says that means, so by definition, it is a shared good. Even though there's no patch of land that we share, and each person has their own field and growing their own crops, but we're all simultaneously enjoying the rain. So it's always shared. You will always say Hatova Meitiv on rain. And the Rush says that no, a field is no different than a house. If I own a field myself, then when it rains, I'm receiving a good, a benefit, a blessing of rain from my field. If I don't share my field with anyone, I'll say Shechianu. Only if I have a shared field with a partner will I say Hatov HaMeitiv. Everyone following me? Hopefully, yes. I realize I might have switched Rashi and the Rush, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who says which one. Okay.
But that it seems, Rabbi, that would be the case with this, because one of the reasons we're all getting immunized is to protect ourselves, but also to reach the critical mass needed for herd immunity. That
Excellent. 1 second, Linda, don't get ahead of us, okay? But you're right on point. Okay. Now the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, like what I call the Rush, which I think actually is not myself I'm getting confused, but what I call the Rush, that when it rains, there's been a drought and we're all starving and none of us have crops growing, and then it rains. So the Shulchan Aruch says, like the opinion, that if you are a partner, if you have a partnered field, you say Hatov HaMeitiv, but if you own a field alone, you say Shechianu. Now, I thought at first glance, this is very parallel to our situation, right? It's like the vaccine is raining from heaven. So we're all getting the vaccine simultaneously. We're all happy that we're getting the vaccine, but the vaccine that I'm going to get wherever I go to get it, right, goes into my body. That vial, right, that is not being shared with anyone, right? I'm getting a vaccine, you're getting a vaccine. It's like the field. That field, your field gets rain, my field gets rain. And unless we're sharing a specific rain, I'm sorry, we're going to go a few minutes over tonight, I apologize. You would say Shechianu. I was very happy. So we have witnesses. Whoever was in Shul on Shabbos afternoon, we discussed this, and this was my suggestion. Shabbos afternoon, at least I didn't see it before Shabbos. I think it was only published after Shabbos. I mentioned Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon basically says the same thing. Says the same thing in his tshuva, and therefore says, I don't want no one dispute this yet. No one debate me yet. I'm going to give you time to debate it, but I just want to make sure everyone understands. So based on this logic, I thought everyone should say Shechianu, not Hatov HaMeitiv, because we're all getting it simultaneously. But if the good that we are blessing is the vaccination, that vaccination I'm not sharing with anyone. I get my vaccination. My body is vaccinated. That's not shared with anyone. Everyone following me? Now, to Linda's point, so Shabbos afternoon, so Hillel Nadler brought up Linda's point and said, but it really is shared, because when I get vaccinated, it's not just a good for me, it's a good for others, because then I can't spread it to others. That was Linda's point, right, Linda? I think that's Linda's point. To which Rob Sundell responded, well, we don't really know if the vaccine does that. We only know for sure that the vaccine prevents serious, symptoms, but we don't really know that it prevents you from giving it to someone else, right? I believe that's still what they say. We at least don't know about it. So it really could be that even depends on that. If my vaccine is benefiting someone else, then you probably would say Hatov HaMeitiv. But if your vaccine is really only benefiting you, then I would think you would say Shechianu. Now, someone might say, for the fact that I'm vaccinated, I won't have to go to the hospital. I'll save a hospital bed for someone else, and that's a good for someone else. But from halacha's perspective, that's too indirect. I don't think we would say Hatov HaMeitiv for that, even though that might be true. But I don't think that would be direct enough to say Hatov HaMeitiv. So I guess bottom line conclusion for this point, we have a few just end notes. From a technical halachic perspective, for the reasons that I just said and some others, I would think the appropriate bracha is Shehachianu. Again, assuming that you're very happy, which I expect people to be. But if it's a big deal to you and you're very happy and you want to thank Hashem, you would say Shehachianu. You would say Shehachianu after getting the vaccine, just to be clear, right? It's not like a food that you'd say before. Shehachianu, right? Something really wonderful happens, and then to response, you say Shehachianu. So, right, the baby is born. In response, you say Shehachianu. You buy the house. In response, you say Shehachianu. So it's in response to the goods. So you would be vaccinated, and then in response, you would soon after say Shehachianu. It doesn't have to be literally that moment. If it's meaningful for you to say at that moment, you could say at that moment. If it's kind of uncomfortable given the situation and you want to say it like a minute later, you could say it a minute later. I think it should be sort of in the setting, but it wouldn't have to be, that moment necessarily that you receive the vaccine. That is what I would personally think is correct. Any questions or comments?
I got a question.
Okay, yes, Carol.
It's been asked, and it certainly is. I'm sure I'm not the only one to wonder, why can't you say both if both are appropriate? And if you say a bracha that's not the one that in general, that is supposedly correct halachically, but you make a decision because you don't know to go to the lowest common denominator for everything and say that bracha, is it a sin?
Very good. So again, my argument is it's not really clear Hatov HaMeitiv is appropriate, but your second point is actually an excellent point I wasn't going to bring up. Shehachianu is the sort of lower common denominator. So that's another reason why on a technical level, Shehachianu is better, because even if it should be Hatov HaMeitiv, if you say Shehachianu, but yeah, but that's also fine. Whereas vice versa, if it really should be Shehachianu and you say Hatov HaMeitiv, then it really is incorrect. So that's another reason why, on a very technical level, Shehachianu is preferred. Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon makes that same point also.
And if it's incorrect, have you committed a sin? When your intent is to cover.
If you say Shehachianu, it won't be a sin. If you say Shehachianu, you're asking good questions, but it's just we're already over, so I can't open up that.
Okay.
For those who are interested, first of all, sign off if you need to go. I'm just going to point you this last thing, and then people can stay on if they want to continue to ask questions or discuss. Others did also suggest if there's something you want to say beforehand, it's just interesting to be aware. The Shulchan Aruch says, based on the Gemara, there's what to say before any medical procedure.
Yeah.
Hanichnas lahakiz dam, at that time it meant bloodletting. I have in parentheses, Mishnah Berurah says, v'chein l'chol davar refuah, any medical procedure. Omer, a person can say beforehand, this is what the Gemara suggests. Yehi ratzon me'Hashem Elokai, may it be Hashem's will. She'esik zed, that this procedure should be leave for me, l'refuah, for a healing. Ki rofe chinamata, for you are the free giver of healing. L'achar shehekiz yomar, then after the bloodletting, you would say, Baruch rofei cholim, blessed is the one who heals the sick. It certainly is appropriate to say if someone would want to, and it can be actually very meaningful. I haven't really thought about it, but I just share with you one other source. The Aruch HaShulchan says, "V'nachon shekol refuah shenotel yomar," and it's proper that anytime a person takes a medicine. Honestly, I can't say I do this, but I can see it be very meaningful. Here are some of Hashem Elokai shtei zeh li refuah. Imagine, certainly if it's something more significant, but you're on some regiment of pills. And for every pill, you say this brief tefillah. He says, and there are pious people that do this, that say this brief tefillah before medical procedures, even before taking a medicine. I have this note here. Rabbi Yosef Tzvi suggests, certainly, again, if someone is moved to this, there are appropriate prakim of Tehillim or davening to say Nishma at the beginning of Shabbos Shacharis, Mizmor Latoda, obviously. Mizmor Shiur Chanukat Habaya to thank Hashem. So these are additional things to be aware of, and if they're meaningful for you, And it really is obviously a really, really big deal. We thank Hashem that, scientists, doctors were able to, in such incredible speed, develop the vaccine. And, we hope we will continue to only hear more good news, less bad news. And I hope everyone here who's davening to get the vaccine quickly, we should get that bracha. And but seriously, it certainly, if we are moved to thank Hashem, it's very important to do so. And saying the bracha of Shechianu is one appropriate way. And but a person can in other ways personal to them, in their own words, in the words of Tehillim, can and should thank Hashem as well. It's already 9:07, but I'm going to stay on. If anyone has any questions, comments, feel free to stay on and to discuss. If not, certainly have a good night and have a good Shabbos if I don't see you.
Yeah.
Bye to everyone who's signing off.
Joel had brought up Shabbos afternoon. When you have a chance, I'd be interested in whether there was response from the polio from like 19.
I looked into it. I didn't speak to Joel, so I don't know what he's referring to. Someone, Joel Berkowitz, seemed to know that there was some discussion maybe about this with the polio vaccine. I did try to find. I have to ask Joel again. I didn't see anything, but
Okay.
yeah. But I'll ask Joel what he was referring to, and I'll find out.
I think what he was saying, I'm older than he is, but it was such a big thing at the time that, like the start of the school year was delayed and camps stayed open longer so that the kids didn't go back to their homes. So, I mean, it was a big deal, maybe not as big as this, but we were both separately just curious whether there had been any sort of response of when the vaccines came out.
I do not know of any.
Okay.
Can't say for sure there isn't, which would lead you to believe that there wasn't this mass, discussion of people saying brachos then, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
Thank you.
Rabbi, could you please put your screen up again? I'd like to see that Yehi Ratzon.
The tefillah?
Yeah, the tefillah, Yehi Ratzon.
Sure. I can also, let me put it up.
You send an email?
Sure, but I'll put it up now. So Rabbi Ramon sort of added to it and slightly modified it for the coronavirus. You're right here. Yehi Ratzon me'Hashem Elokai sheyehei esek zeh li l'refua ki rofei chinam ata. I think he added something like sheyehei esek zeh li u'lebeit Yisrael u'lekol ha'olam l'refua, something like u'leshmira min hamagefa hazu. That this should be for me, for the Jewish people, for the entire world, for healing and for protection from this pandemic, something like that.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Rabbi, I'm also curious for the cholera vaccine with Rabbi Akiva Eger. And
Yeah. Well, they didn't have a vaccine. I
guess when it came eventually, much later, I guess, was there anything?
I don't know of any. I don't know of any. This is the first time ever, as far as I know, there is discussion about saying brachos over a vaccine. None of
Right.
these, people I saw discussing today reference any earlier tshuvas about. I don't know of any earlier discussion.
What about smallpox? That would seem, I mean, the rabbis certainly were attentive to the smallpox vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
We
sure.
have,
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think my sense is that in this example, the poskim are following, I could be wrong, following again the sincere questions that were posed to them. I think people in general sort of I don't know how it started, felt this need and went and asked questions, said, we want to say a bracha. Can we say a bracha? And so, the different, rabbinic authorities, answered how they felt, what they felt was most correct. But I don't think, even the ones that said you should say a bracha, I don't know if, I could be wrong. I don't know if it was their idea, so to speak. So if other people didn't suggest it for polio or whatever, no one, maybe people should have, but no one thought about it. And so they didn't say a bracha for the polio vaccine. Maybe they should have.
So
Again,
Rabbi,
there's no line in Shulchan Aruch where you can look up, do you say a bracha on a vaccine?
I have a question. With
Yes,
some of
Linda.
the poskim is saying that we have a chiyuv to take this vaccine,
Mm-hmm.
and at least some of them have come out to say that.
We lost you, Linda. You cut out for a minute,
Or
Linda.
does it change how you look at it? If it's a chiyuv,
I don't think so, no.
does it become a mitzvah? Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of
'Cause
Shechianu, I
if
don't think,
that's
in terms of what we discussed
okay.
tonight, it doesn't
Now,
make a difference. Obviously, everyone should get the vaccine, unless for some medical reason they tell you not to get the vaccine. But obviously, everyone should get the vaccine. I'm sure everyone here is getting the vaccine. But
thank you.
sure, Linda.
I just wanted to ask because I feel like I'm completely missing something here. To me, it seems like the evidence is like overwhelmingly that this is a communal thing. Working in a hospital where over 100% of our ICU, I mean, we have like more people in the ICU than we have beds in the ICU. I'm intubating COVID positive patients all the time. Like we had to cut down our ORs to like 50% because we have too many staff who are out with COVID. I mean, it's like so overwhelming. One person getting a COVID vaccine prevents, somebody from being in our ICU and enables us to do like cancer operations for people who have lung cancer, which we can't do now. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. So to me, it seems like there's an overwhelmingly communal benefit from my getting a shot a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm missing the.
So I think, I totally understand the question. And there is obviously a communal benefit. So the point is that, but imagine, let's say in the Gemara's case, there's a drought, like the whole town, right, is suffering. And then rain comes and, and then suddenly it's good for everyone, right? That also is clearly a communal good also, right? And, you can imagine anything, we're all gonna have food and then everything becomes easier. And, there's also, but the opinion that we accept is if we all just own our fields, we say Shechianu, even though it clearly is a communal good. So I guess you have to reframe it and really can't frame it as a communal good. But what I guess emerges from the Gemara, according to those commentaries, which are the commentaries that we accept, is that Hatov HaMeitiv, you're right, it's not a fair way to say it. Hatov HaMeitiv is not that it's not when you say on a communal good, but is you say that on, it's more of like a shared good, like almost like when we share a bottle of wine, like when we it has to be when like almost there's like a tangible thing that we are together are enjoying. As opposed to, it's just not as sort of diffuse. It's clearly is a communal good, but it just has to be even sort of more two people interlocking, sort of enjoying something. Like the parents have a baby, right? It's their baby that they share.
What about the vaccinator and the patient receiving the vaccine? That's not a way of sharing.
I don't think so. Because again, the vaccinator would say, even though the vaccinator could be the vaccinator is also in tears and is so happy for that person, seriously. But again, then that goes back to the point that it has to be, to say the bracha, it has to be something more that like sort of you are sort of receiving directly, personally to you. It can't just be that you're happy for someone else. I definitely hear your and that's why, again, Rav Shafter said he thought you say Hatov HaMeitiv, which I'm sure it's partially coming from that. On one level, intuitively, it is so communal. These are things that honestly we don't learn so often, right? Because again, we don't say these brachos so often in general. But to me, again, that rain Gemara, again, and the way we paskin that Gemara is that you say Shechlianu even though the rain comes to the whole town. Again, to me, it seems very parallel. But there are great authorities that you say you should say Atov Ametiv. Some said you should say anything, but some did say you should say Atov Ametiv. Yeah.
In a way, if you can't be okay, you can't function. So one of the things that's really different, whether it's polio or smallpox or anything else, and whether we can have gotten the word that other people in those times were looking for a bracha when the polio vaccine came out. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have the media communication that we have today. That's a very big difference. And so people are kind of left with this feeling of I'm going to die when they listen to it. And when you get a vaccine whether you could be thinking all kinds of magic things about it. This saves my life. We don't know yet. We hope, but we don't know everything about it yet. So the first line of anything is enormous relief that not only is it there, but that you got it. And then the secondary piece is that it's good for the community. So I guess I'm a little confused why it couldn't be okay to say both.
So this is sort of you're agreeing with Sarah, and so you're in good company. There is a dispute in general. When you said Hatov Metiv, you say also Shechlianu. You wouldn't say both though. Just it's either Hatov Metiv or Shechlianu.
Why?
Again, the answer is that and maybe because I mispresented it. I presented it as the way people normally say it, but it's not really a precise definition. We only say Hatov Metiv if there is something specific, tangible, that two people directly are enjoying or benefiting from. Like there's a baby, there's a house that two people live in. There's a baby that two parents enjoy. There's literally a bottle of wine that two people are drinking together. So it is a dispute, but that's the opinion that's accepted in Shulchan Aruch. Then you say Hatov Metiv. But if there's kind of like this diffuse general good, which obviously there is, but it's hard to link two people in a sort of tangible way, then to me, it would seem that we say Shechlianu.
But you don't say both anyway, right? You're going to say, either you say Hatov Metiv or Shechlianu. There's no situation that calls for both simultaneously. Because
Mike, this is just for you, but the Taz says whenever you say Hatov Metiv, you do also say Shechlianu. We don't accept the Taz.
But we don't pass it like the Taz.
That's what I was alluding to. But you're right. It's one or the other. It's one or the other.
Can I present a different possible scenario? So we have the individuals, and I think we all get why an individual will be happy to get the vaccine. We have the large communal level of benefit that Sarah brought up, which I also am in good company agreeing with Sarah, but it's not the first time I've disagreed with you. What about a situation where, let's say, one member of the household is high risk? And so it actually is a benefit on multiple people as each member of the household is vaccinated, because no vaccine is 100% effective. So even if that high risk person had already been vaccinated, it still offers more protection when their other household members are vaccinated.
Sure.
Is that a benefit?
So again, so if that's and I do defer the doctors, but I thought that was still sort of up for debate, or we don't know for sure. Meaning if I get the vaccine, can I still get it and give it to someone?
Well, I think the idea is that if you don't have as intense a case, and this is theory, we don't really know, but the idea is that if you don't develop such a strong inflammatory response and you don't have
so it'll be less likely to share. You're not coughing it everywhere. Yeah.
Pass it on, and that's how we're protecting people who are vulnerable.
Yeah, maybe.
Or it's a household where somebody cannot take it. They're saying if you have allergies or particular conditions, don't take it. And it's really important that you surround yourself with people who aren't going to give it to you or just stay all alone all the time. What about that?
Yeah.
What-
So okay. So Tashana, and Sarah, I hear, and it's honestly, it's just hard for me to answer. You know, it gets into like, is it a significant enough benefit? Maybe it is a strong enough argument to say a tova meitiv. Really, maybe it is. I don't know. It's hard for me to know. Shechianu will still be the halachically safer bracha because, but you're right. Maybe at some point that would be enough.
Wait, I'm confused now, because if there's no benefit to you if I get the vaccine,
Well, they're saying there
then
is,
what
though.
is herd immunity? I mean, the whole point of herd immunity is that, you know, 3/4 of us get it and it works, and maybe 1/4 of us either don't get it or it doesn't work, but everybody's protected.
Well, so again, this is not.
And if it's a one-on-one kind of a thing, then there's.
So again, I'm a layperson, but I think that's the bad news, that we don't know.
My understanding of herd immunity is that enough of us get the vaccine and it works for enough of us, and then that protects the people who it either doesn't work for or didn't get the vaccine for some reason.
I'd like to make a point. You said that you say the bracha at the time of the bracha, even though that sometimes down the road it may be bad, you still say the bracha of Shechianu or Tova Meitiv. The same thing here. We don't get the herd immunity till down the road. At the time that you're getting the injection, it should be qualified just for the person getting the injection.
Right. Well, so I mean, I think that's the question. Again, I don't know. Maybe Sarah, you can speak more. I think that's the question. Will it? It might not create herd immunity. I mean, we really don't want that to be true, but we don't know for sure.
My second and somewhat less serious question was, if I didn't know about, say, Shechianu for my first shot, can I say it with the second one that I would get in a few weeks, or is you supposed to say it just for one and not both? Or
so I would say probably if it probably depends how you feel. Meaning, like if you I do want to think about this a little bit, but I think if you feel joyous and happy, then you could still say it. If by the time you go back the second time and it's like just like a doctor's appointment, then
you would
right.
think that because you don't get the full benefit until the second one, then you're really more joyous at that time than the first one, because you're still able to come down with the
so probably you do. Yeah, I mean, again, unless you just know internally that you don't, it's just not, you don't feel any joy or excitement. But as long as you're joyous, then I would think you could.
Yeah, well, you know, you look at it though, but like my understanding is that the vaccines, it varies between the two of them, but they're about 80% effective after the first shot and 90 plus after the second. So there is a significant
that is
in,
significant. Yeah, it is significant.
You know, in risk with the second one as well.
You also said that sort of what's driving the Shechianu is gratitude. So you have to feel joy, or is gratitude enough for this? That it's there and it's helpful. And I mean, we might be too worn out to really be joyous at the moment. Well,
I hear,
you know, we might be.
You're right. Probably significant gratitude is enough. Yeah. Seriously,
have we surprised you with how emotional we're all getting, and how?
No, actually, people have gotten much more emotional. But
we're all much
I was saying
older
it's something
than
that you know, it's I'll just share with you. You know, I'm on a rabbinic WhatsApp group, and this is before any of these public positions, and so the question came up, and people are making comments. And, you know, obviously it's just, you know, it is not real thorough, you know, discussion going on. And, you know, one person said, well, like, why is it different than any other vaccine. And the person is honest saying, like, we don't say, like Phil, like you said, you don't say Shachianu on the flu vaccine. And so one rabbi commented, and he's a chaplain that works in a hospital. And he said, I can tell you this is totally not comparable to the flu vaccine. He said, I work on a floor with COVID patients. I was vaccinated, and there were tears in my eyes, and there were tears in other people's eyes. And I can tell you that he happened to say Hatova Meitiv, that I can tell you I said Hatova Meitiv, and if that was a mistake, Hashem will forgive me.
And out of curiosity, since there are two doses and there are significant differences between the first and second doses, would it make sense to make Shechianu twice?
Once you start talking, I realized you were going to ask that. I have to think about it. My intuition is no, is that the first one, would cover it. But I hear it's a good question. It is a good question.
Rabbi Hellman,
Yes,
I have a question.
yes, Joyce.
I have a question. When we are davening and we get to the refuah Hashem in our davening, is there anything we should say differently? If we have somebody who's ill, there is something that we say. Is there anything we should be saying in general for all of us at this time?
That's an excellent question. The very beginning, the very, very beginning of all this, maybe within the first month or two, I remember there were tefillos that people wrote. I remember, honestly, none of them really, I didn't really like any of them, the wording we certainly all should be davening. We say it too fast in the minyan, but I'll tell you where it comes up in my mind. So William, I never can remember wording, off the top of my head. So William will help me. But on Mondays and Thursdays, when we lane in shul, so we only do this on Mondays and Thursdays. We don't do it on Shabbos. So some people might not be as familiar with it, but on Mondays and Thursdays, when we're wrapping up the Torah during Haba and Glila, so there's like 4 or 5 Yehi Ratzones that we say. And one of them is, William, which one? Do you know what but it's basically Yehi Ratzon. It has Mageifa in it. But basically, we think this is so strange. It used to be, I don't know, it wasn't so uncommon. There were, they didn't have antibiotics. There were plagues, sicknesses, and people died.
You hear some all plague tatino limenoa mashchidu magefa me alenu me alcohol mobit Yisrael.
So Hashem should, remove, prevent. I don't know. Mashchi is destruction. Magefa means plague, means disease. So we definitely should. Probably, if you'd want to include it in your Shmona Esrei, which is a very appropriate thing to do. I would include in Shema Kolenu. There's a break in Shema Kolenu where to add things. Rafeinu is really more for people who are ill to be healed. If you know someone who's ill who needs healing, then you can add there. But if it's sort of in general, probably be in Shema Kolenu. But I do not have any kind of set text, to share with you. But you can include things in your own words in Shema Kolenu.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly appropriate. Okay, any last questions or comments? 2.5 hours to go. I wasn't planning on staying on, till midnight, but
we can drink champagne.
Yeah. Okay, all right, everyone. Thank you. All the questions and comments and discussion is all, it's good for all of us. I certainly got a lot of it also. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And
Thank
good
you.
night. And
Thank
good
you.
Shabbos. Bye.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
Shabbos.